Hello and welcome to a quick and dirty guide to the Stonevault, one of the new War Within dungeons in Season 1 for Mythic Plus. The goal of this guide is to go over the important mechanics or strategies for the trash and bosses in this dungeon so that you can succeed from day 1. So let's get into it. As you start the run, you'll first see the Cursed Heart Invader. These mobs frequently cast Arcing Void, a chain lightning effect, and should be kicked when possible. They also apply a very nasty curse debuff called Void Infection, so bringing more cursed spells is helpful. The most important cast is the Ghastly Void Soul's Howling Fear, which will fear your entire party if not kicked. In this run, we opted to pull all 3 packs at the start and Lust to nuke it down, but depending on how confident your healer feels, saving it for the first boss can also be good, as he's coming up soon. The next few pulls have the same casters and spells to watch for, as well as Earth-infused golems and repurposed loader bots, which I skipped over in that first tactic pull. Repurposed loader bots frequently jump to a player, indicated by the usual swirly, which can be dodged, while the golems will cast a party-wide AoE ground. This hurts quite a bit, but can be LOS with the hallway we just came from. Additionally, the golems have a frontal aimed at the tank, so stick behind them and be careful if your tank repositions. There is an indicator, but it can be very hard to see in the middle of combat. The other trash pulls in this area are all made up of the same ones, but be careful since these packs can either have 2 fear kicks, 2 curse debuffs, or 2 golems with the ground pound AoE. Once both golems are dead, a short RP will start to bring the first boss in. E.D.N.A, or E.D.N.A, is the first boss of the dungeon and thankfully has a very strict sequence of abilities, but will require your healer to keep up high AoE healing while not forgetting the tank. The first mechanic of the fight is Volatile Spike, which spawns pillars under 3 players' feet after a short delay. Running into one of these pillars will one-shot you, so be careful with your move. Shortly after spawning the spikes, E.D.N.A will target every player with a refracting beam, which does a decent amount of damage, so you don't want to stack up on your party member. Any pillar that a beam hits will also break, putting a short but sizable dot on every player, which stacks. E.D.N.A will do this sequence twice, and while the party is dealing with the beams, the tank gets targeted by Seismic Smash, a heavy tank buster that leaves a long dot, but dispelling the dot gives him a 25% damage reduction against the next one for a short duration. After 2 cycles, the boss will cast Earth Shatterer, which does large party damage and then shatters any remaining pillars. Then the cycle repeats. As long as you deal with your pillars and keep your tank alive, the boss should die relatively quickly. After the first boss, mobs will enter the chamber from 2 side hallways. You have your choice to head to the left and face Skarmorak, or to the right and face the machine speaker. One of the mobs on the left, the Void-bound Despoiler, will cast Void Outburst, a large amount of pulsing AoE damage, which is a good time to use defenses. I would not recommend trying to pull these 2 packs together until you're more familiar with the dungeon, as we have the Cursed Heart Invader kicks and curses with some nasty tank damage. The engine speakers and Inspiring 4chans are pretty much only tank damage, smash, and a vulnerability debuff respectively, but together they can be very dangerous for tanks. The Despoiler also has another hefty tank hit with Shadow Claw. As you can see here, the combination of the tank damage plus Void Outburst was enough to take our tank down and a couple of our party members, but thankfully the run back is short and we managed to recover the pull. In this run, we elected to go to Skarmorak first, and headed to the left, and there are a few new mobs as we make our way down the hallway. The first is the Void-bound Howler, which casts Piercing Wail. This is a moderate AoE pulse of damage with a stacking vulnerability, so this is the priority kick. You'll also see Void-touched Elementals, who frequently spawn swirls at your feet. The last new mob in the Skarmorak Hall is the Turned Speaker, who will cast Censoring Gear, a damaging spell which silences the target, so kick as many as you can. The rest of the packs to the boss are made up of the same mobs we've seen, so I'll speed it up until we reach Skarmorak. Skarmorak is similar to E.D.N.A with a strict sequence of casts, but you have to pay more attention to dodging swirls, and your DPS will have to switch targets regularly. He starts the fight with Crystalline Smash, a decent tank hit which spawns 3 crystal shards around the room. Killing a shard does a chunk of party damage and applies a vulnerability debuff, so only kill 1 shard at a time while you cleave the boss. Shortly after the boss spawns crystals, he'll cast Unstable Crash, dealing damage in melee and spawning several unstable fragments, 1 per party member. Collecting these fragments leaves a decent dot, but also increases healing done and damage done to the next mechanic. After 2 sets of crystals and smashes, the boss will cast Fortified Shell, gaining a shield, which gets bigger for any remaining crystals. While the shield holds, the boss pulses ramping party damage. DPS and healers should make sure they get 1 unstable fragment to help heal through and break the shield, and the boss will die easily. After Skarmorak dies, look for the minecart on the side of the room, which will take you back to the first chamber and save you some time on the run back. On the path to the machine speakers, you'll see the same forge hands and engine speakers from before, but you'll also find forge-bound menders who have a frequent damage cast alloy bolt and a high priority kick with restoring metals. The large forge loader mobs have a random targeted frontal, so make sure you're paying attention to the direction they're facing. And they also have a nasty debuff they put out called Molten Mortar. This needs to be defensive as it can't be dispelled. The rest of this hallway is made up of the same mobs, so make sure you watch for kicks on restoring metals, dodge frontals, and help your tank survive heavy incoming damage. While in this section, there is also a buff you can get if you have a warrior, a blacksmith, or a dwarf in the party. If you pull this pack in the back corner, there is an interactable piece of metal, which will give all nearby allies 10% verse for 10 minutes or until they die. Since the forge loaders have a lot of health and the dot they apply is particularly bad, we elected to skirt around them in this run and make our way to the boss. Machine Speakers is one of the most hectic fights in the War Within dungeons, with several mechanics overlapping and many potentially lethal. These bosses don't share health pool, so try to cleave them evenly. Speaker Brock will frequently cast Molten Metal, which does a large amount of AoE damage and slows players. Speaker Dorlita will use the same lava cannon frontal the forge loaders do. Eventually, Brock will cast Scrap Song, setting a large cube through the middle of the room, which does massive damage on hit, so you'll want to tuck onto the sides. He also frequently follows this cast with Molten Metal, so you'll want a ranged kick ready to move out and interrupt. As the fight progresses, Brock will cast Exhaust Vents, empowering 3 of the 4 vents around the room, which will slowly spew lava and cut off space. Dorlita will also hit your tank with Igneous Hammer, a nasty tank buster throughout the fight, before casting Blazing Crescendo to pull the cube into the center, which will erupt for lethal damage in the middle and moderate damage by the edge. Your party will want to be on the inactive vent to dodge the lava waves that come after this eruption. The rest of this fight is dodging the mechanics, especially as several overlap, keeping an eye on your kicks, kill the bosses together or they start to pulse insane AoE damage. Alternatively, die and hope your tank survives to finish the fight. Remember that on your way back from the machine speakers, there is a minecart to take to get back to the central room, though there may be mobs in the way depending on your route. Once both Skarmorak and the machine speakers are dead, the final hallway to the last boss will open with a few new mobs. The first of these you'll encounter are the Cursed Forged Honor Guard, which have a ton of health and will occasionally pick a player to cast Shield Stampede at, locking onto their location, and after a delay, charging forward, dealing damage and stunning. They also have a hefty tank hit called Stonebreaker's Strike. If possible, you'll want to bait these charges into nearby walls so the mobs don't run all over the place. To defeat both honor guards, you'll go to the next pack, which has some more, as well as Cursed Forged Menders, which are the same as the Mender mobs from the Machine Speaker hallway. You'll also find Rock Smashers, who will cast the aptly named Smash Rock. A moderate AoE hit applies a vulnerability and knocks you back. Following each Smash Rock, they'll also do Granite Eruption and place some swirls for you to dodge. The last new mob for the dungeon are the Cursed Forge Stone Shapers. These mobs have a spammable tank cast, which you should kick if you can, but their main cast is Earth Burst Totem, which will spawn a totem which will begin casting Earth Burst. This does a ton of AoE damage, so make sure you focus down the totems as soon as they spawn. The last two packs both have a Rock Smasher in them, so it's easiest to pull them separate by LOSing around the corner. But if you're up to it, you could pull them together and be ready to use defensives on the later smashes, as they'll both be stacking the vulnerability. In both Rock Smasher pulls, you'll be ready to face the final boss, Void Speaker Eric. You'll notice two portals are behind the boss when you pull them, and these will be important for a later mechanic. Frequently throughout the fight, the boss will cast Unbridled Void, a large frontal cone which can be very hard to see in the room, especially as the fight goes on. He'll also regularly apply Void Corruption to everyone in the party, an infinite dot that scales up in damage, and the only way to remove it is to run near one of the portals. Doing so removes the dot and the portal, while another portal spawns somewhere else in the room. He'll also target everyone with Entropic Reckoning, dealing a burst of damage to them and leaving a damaging puddle behind. You'll want to place these near the edge of the room or by old puddles to save space, while also moving around to clear your corruption. If you can manage your space and movement, the rest of the boss is pretty straightforward and you'll have defeated the Stonevault. Thank you very much for watching this guide, and I hope you found it helpful. I'll have more guides coming for the rest of the Season 1 dungeons soon, so don't forget to subscribe.